It's become a thing in recent years, going for it on fourth down. And analytics have changed the mindset. It used to be coaches were very careful not to do anything that would seem to be unconventional, because if you do the unconventional thing and you fail, you get criticized, and if that happens enough, you get fired. So you always reside in the boundaries of the conventional decisions. I remember how crazy it was, Charean, years ago when Barry Switzer went for it on 4th and 1 from his own 29 in a game against the Eagles. How nuts we thought it was. Now, we probably look at it and say it was the right thing to do. And that pendulum has swung because, and I'm a firm believer in this, internally, the analytics departments, in which the owners have invested so much money, the ones who really want to win, they've got the beefed up analytics departments. If you don't do what the formula suggests, you got to answer directly to the owner. And the owner is getting his or her information directly from the analytics experts, and they understand that. They speak that language more easily than they speak X's and O's. So we're seeing these aggressive moves that the analytics would support. But again, if you roll the dice 100 times and it comes out 51 times your way, that's the way you should do it all the time. Well, the other 49 times it doesn't. That's part of what gets lost on this. These numbers are based on many, many iterations, and the idea that if you do this all the time, it's going to work out for you just enough times to make it worthwhile. The problem is, if it's just a little bit of a difference, there's going to be a lot of times where it doesn't work out.
Yeah, and Mike, I would add 2-point conversions to that too. We're seeing way more of those earlier in games than we used to. And again, that goes back to analytics. There's no question about that. If you even go back probably 10 years, at least 15, when you and I were growing up, guy, if it's 4th and 1 on your own end, you're never going for it. I mean, that's just, you're sending the punt team out, not giving it a second thought. And now there is a second thought, and teams do go for it in their own end early in games. We saw Mike McCarthy do it against the Broncos, and it backfired on him when they didn't get it twice in a row in their first 2 drives, and they ended up getting blown out. So when they make or miss these fourth downs or these 2-point conversions, they either look like geniuses or they look like idiots. But as you said, when you have the owner there with the analytics person whispering in their ear, well, this is what you were supposed to do, it might save the coach's job anyway.
The numbers say do it all the time, because if you do it all the time, more than half of the time, it will work out to your advantage. It's that simple. And sometimes the number is 60%, 65%, whatever, but you take the analytics to the extreme, as little as 50.01%, if you do it every time, it will fall your way, just that one little pebble, that one little grain on the scale that tips it that way. Then the idea is you do it all the time. And, this is the point I try to make, and this is where the analytics mafia gets very, very defensive. They get very, very condescending. The point is, any given coach does not have the luxury to hang around for all 100 times that you do it to have it work 51 times. It could be that the first 49 times you do it, it fails, and you get fired. And then the next 51 come up your way for the next coach. So that's where you've got to be pragmatic, you've got to be practical, and you've got to have a coach who understands when to say, hey, look, I get it, I comprehend the numbers, I realize that the mathematically prudent thing for me to do here is to do this because it's mathematically prudent to do it 100 out of 100 times because it's going to hit 51 times. But this is going to be one of those times that I'm going to err on the 49% side. And I felt that specifically in the Chargers-Steelers game, Charean, when it's tied up late and when the Chargers are facing 4th and 1 from their own 34 and they decide to go for it. You look, under laboratory settings, and you punch those numbers in, it's 34-34, tie game with 3:48 to play, 4th and 1 from your own 34. Yeah, it makes sense to go for it there because then there's a certain percentage that you're going to hold them to a field goal and a certain percentage you're going to get a field goal or score a touchdown, and that's how it played out. But the problem is that formula ignores the fact that the team that's going for it on 4th and 1 was up 27-10 and blew the lead, and the opponent had all the momentum, and the opponent is feeling good about itself, and you are handing them a golden opportunity to take the ball and score a touchdown and go up 7, and then the next thing you know, they're up 14. I mean, you could feel kind of like just like that sense of, oh my God, why are they doing this? I just think, I know that the formulas get more and more complicated and detailed all the time. I don't think they take into account how much momentum the other team has developed as it's erased a 17-point deficit in the second half. I don't think that's part of the analysis yet.
Yeah, and the emotions are out of the analysis. I mean, it's just straight numbers, and Brandon Staley just goes for it no matter what. And I didn't like that one, and it worked out for the Chargers in the long run. The only thing is, I guess if you figure they're going to score anyway and they have all the momentum, we'll have more time to go back down and score for ourselves, and it worked out for them, a field goal to a touchdown. And so nobody's questioning today that decision by Brandon Staley. But I do wonder what would have happened if they had punted that ball, Mike, that the Steelers may not have gotten a field goal. Perhaps the Chargers hold them and have plenty of time to go down, run out the clock, and score the touchdown. But whatever, it worked out, so nobody's questioning Brandon Staley today. But it feels like every time he's in this situation, regardless of where they are on the field, regardless of what else has happened in the game, that he's just flat out going to go for it. And I didn't look up the numbers today, but at one point, last time I looked up, they had gone for it more times than any other team on fourth down. I assume that's still the case based on us always seeing the Chargers go for it on fourth down.
Hey, it's another data point that goes into the broader formula that justifies going for it, 4th and 1, in that setting, tie game, with that much time left, because it worked. I mean, that's all this is. It's taking past scenarios and how they played out and baking them into an effort to look forward. That's what, and that's fine, because if you have enough evidence and enough iterations, at some point the numbers are going to harden. And if they keep playing football games over weeks and months and years, the numbers are going to settle in even more, and it's going to become very clear. And it is just a matter of pushing a button. But that just, and I remember when analytics first started to really take off in baseball, and people were saying, "Oh, this has application in football too." Baseball is basically a one-on-one battle between pitcher and batter, because you expect the fielders to be good enough to do their jobs if the ball is hit to them. Now, I know there are errors, but at the highest level, they're not as prevalent as they are elsewhere. With football, it's an 11-on-11 fight where every guy has an assignment, and every guy across from him has an assignment, and something's got to give, and all it takes is one guy who isn't good enough, one guy who's maybe the backup, one guy who isn't feeling well that day. Whatever the case may be, all it takes is one weak link and the whole thing collapses. And I've always been a little leery about these broad proclamations and judgments and decisions, and I think it does have a place. I'm not going to say it doesn't, but I do think there are some situations where you have to consider, just that. Charean, you've been to enough games. You get a sense in the building. There's a sense. It's intangible, but it's there when the momentum swings. You can feel it through the TV screen sometimes watching the game. You just, it's real. And I don't think that's conducive to any mathematical formula that anyone could devise.
You and I are on the same wavelength on this, Mike. There's no question about that. I think there's a place for analytics, but I also think they're being overused at this point. You look at Bill Belichick. I mean, every coach in the NFL should be looking at Bill Belichick and what he does and how he does it. And he does it by gut feel. Now, I remember back in that Colts game, it didn't work out for them many years ago very well. But for the most part, he knows when to do it and when not to do it. And they're very successful doing it when they do it, because he has such a good gut feel for when they should use it. And by the way, great Matt, our producer, just looked up the numbers. Lions 23 fourth down attempts, Washington 23, Browns 22, Chargers, Titans, Jaguars at 18. So Brandon Staley does not go for it more than the other. Happy to see Dan Campbell, though, going for some of those. When you're an 0 for team, I think you should go for it most times, Mike, to try to pull some extra possessions and score some points when you're not very good at scoring points.
Well, that's right. And that's a time where you would ignore the analytics and do what's in the interest of trying to give a desperate team a kick in the ass. So there are times where the analytics would tell you, don't go for it on fourth down, but you defy the math. And again, the closer you get to 51-49, the greater the reason there is to consider maybe this is one of those situations where I go with the 49. Maybe there are other factors that favor me doing the thing that is just a hair under. And if I have to have an awkward conversation with the owner tomorrow, I'll defend myself. And but that really has changed the dynamics inside a football organization. Someone explained that to me earlier this year, that it makes the owners far better versed in communicating with coaches and not being bamboozled by coach speak. Used to be the owners would not feel like they could have an intelligent conversation with X's and O's, and now the owners can cut through the BS because they have a common language when it comes to analytics. And it's making coaches more accountable, and it's making them more willing to do things they otherwise wouldn't do because they know if they don't do the thing that the analytics expert is saying into the headset, you need to do it, you're going to have a problem the next day.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.